What happens when a grieving widower builds a greenhouse in memory of his wife, only to have a new neighbor hijack it in the name of community? You won't believe how he turned her power play into the most humbling lesson of her life. What followed left the entire neighborhood speechless. People think retirement is all rocking chairs and early dinners. Let me tell you something. I didn't retire to become a doormat. My name's Walter Dean Hughes. I'm 61 years old, a proud son of Georgia, a father of 2 grown boys, a widower for 5 years, and if you'd ask anyone who knows me, they'd tell you I'm the kind of man who doesn't raise his voice, unless I'm raising hell for the right reason. I've lived in this same house for over 30 years. Built it myself, one paycheck at a time. My backyard? That's not a lawn, that's a legacy. Fruit trees, flower beds, and right in the center of it all, my pride and joy, a greenhouse I built with my wife. It ain't just glass and wood. It's where I keep our memories growing, literally. Tomatoes the size of grapefruits, collard greens that could shade your porch, and basil that'll make your grandma's pasta beg for mercy. That greenhouse? That's where I go to feel close to my wife. And wouldn't you know, that's exactly what someone tried to take from me. That Saturday morning, I was feeling generous. The church food pantry down by Fulton Street had been struggling to stock fresh produce lately, and Reverend Jacobs had mentioned they were short. So I woke up early, put on my straw hat, and picked the ripest, juiciest tomatoes from my greenhouse. A few cucumbers, some spring onions, a handful of okra for good measure. I washed them, wiped them down, and packed them into a wicker basket. No charge, just kindness. That's how I was raised. I was just about to load the basket into the back of my rusty old Chevy when I heard her voice for the first time. Sharp as lemon juice on a paper cut. Sweet mercy, if nails on a chalkboard had a voice, it'd be hers. Excuse me, are you selling vegetables from your yard? I turned around, and there she stood, hands on hips, lips pursed tighter than a jar of pickles, wearing one of those beige linen vests that screams, "I volunteer opinions no one asked for." Karen. I didn't know her name yet, but honey, that attitude gave it away. These? No, ma'am. I'm donating them to the church down the road, I said, still polite. Well, I don't like the idea of a commercial farm in a residential zone. It lowers property value. And I'm part of the HOA committee now, so I suggest you be careful. I blinked at her. Lady, this is a garden. I'm not Amazon fresh. But she wasn't listening. She took out her phone, snapped a picture of my greenhouse, without asking, mind you, and strutted off like she'd just shut down a crime ring. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another bored neighbor playing sheriff in suburbia. I went about my business, dropped the vegetables off at the church, and had a slice of peach pie with Reverend Jacobs. Felt good. Came home whistling. But the next morning, my greenhouse door was wide open. I never leave that door open. That greenhouse stays locked tighter than a safe, especially with the neighborhood kids always trying to sneak in and play zombie apocalypse among the tomato vines. So when I saw the door swinging, my stomach dropped. I walked inside and froze. My potting station had been moved. My irrigation timer was missing. 3 of my tomato plants, the ones I'd been pruning for weeks, were pulled from the soil like weeds. And taped to the inside of the greenhouse wall was a printed letter with a typed heading. Temporary Community Use Notice. In response to local concerns and in accordance with Homeowners Association guidelines, this greenhouse space has been designated for shared community gardening efforts. At the bottom, Karen J. Millstone, Interim HOA Liaison. I stared at the paper like it had personally slapped me. Interim what now? I called the HOA. Of course I did. Turns out, Karen had gone and wriggled herself into a temporary liaison position because the last guy stepped down for health reasons, which is suburban talk for, he got tired of the drama. She claimed I was running a private agricultural facility without board approval. I said, "Ma'am, this is a greenhouse in my backyard that I built with my money on land I own." But they said her report had flagged me for unauthorized community exclusion. Whatever the hell that means. She claimed several neighbors felt excluded because I wasn't sharing the space. You can't make this stuff up. They told me until it was resolved. The HOA had provisional jurisdiction over shared green space features. You mean she's claiming my greenhouse is public property? I asked. For now, yes, sir, the HOA rep said, sounding like even he didn't believe what he was saying. 2 days after that mess, she went full dictator. She showed up in my yard with a locksmith, while I was inside on a call with my son. Didn't ring the bell, didn't say a word, just stood there in her khakis and floppy hat like she owned the place. Changed the locks on my greenhouse. I came out and said, "Have you lost your damn mind?" Karen blinked at me like I was the one out of line. You were given notice. This greenhouse is now a shared community asset. The locks are being changed for everyone's safety. Everyone's safety from what? Peppers? Basil? What are you scared of, a lettuce uprising? She didn't laugh. Of course she didn't. I stood there watching a man with my keys walk off like it was Tuesday. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march down to that HOA office and flip a table. But I didn't. I don't go to jail for idiots. Instead, I did something worse. I went inside, sat down, and started planning. Saturday morning, I wake up to music. Not music, noise. Somebody blasting acoustic folk covers like they just discovered guitars. I look outside and there's a whole crowd in my backyard. In my backyard, Karen had put up a sign, no joke, Urban Harvest Kickoff, powered by HOA. She had tables set up, people picking strawberries from my greenhouse beds. Some woman was handing out kale chips and claiming we grew them together. I stepped out, still in my robe, and yelled, "What the sweet-baked nonsense is this?" Karen walked up like she was welcoming a guest to her wedding. "Oh, Walter, I didn't expect you this early. We're just showcasing what a community can do when we work together." Community? That greenhouse fed my family through 2 job losses, a recession, and grief. It was built by my hands and my late wife's love. You think slapping community on it makes it yours? She smiled that smug, satisfied grin and said, "It makes it ours." That was it. And let me tell you, friend, that moment right there, that's when I stopped being polite. See, I've been called many things in my life. Quiet, respectful, old school, but never weak. Karen took something sacred and she thought hiding behind rules and fake titles would protect her. She didn't know who she was messing with. I walked back into my house, sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, pulled out my file folders, permits, property maps, tax records, and said to myself, "All right, Walter, let's give him a reason to remember your name." What happened next changed everything. You do not want to miss how this unfolds. People like to say, don't let things get under your skin. Well, let me tell you something. When someone strolls into your life, rips your memories out by the roots, and throws a potluck on the grave of your dignity, it gets under your skin, all right? It gets in your bones. It rides your breath. And that's where I was, sitting in my own kitchen, watching strangers post selfies with carrots I raised like they were kinfolk. I didn't just lose a greenhouse that week. I lost my sanctuary, my peace, my quiet. But see, I've lived too long, seen too much to let somebody like Karen J. Millstone write the final chapter of my story. So I did what grown folks do when the house starts to burn. I grabbed a pen and started taking notes. First thing I did? I bought a $49 motion sensor camera off Amazon and mounted it above the gate, tucked behind the ivy. I wasn't playing anymore. I wanted receipts and I was going to get M. Next, I got myself a fresh binder. Label, Greenhouse War. Yeah, it might sound silly, but you give a man no choice but to fight for what's his and he'll start treating paperwork like ammo. I wrote down every single thing that happened from the moment Karen stepped foot on my property without permission. Dates, names, photos, screenshots, HOA bylaws, county codes. I even printed out the zoning map from the municipal website. And the best part? Karen didn't have the sense God gave a goldfish. She kept posting all her community events on the neighborhood app like she was running a campaign for mayor. I had evidence falling in my lap like autumn leaves. Let me explain something. I take pride in my soil. Organic compost, rain barrel irrigation, no chemicals. I test my water supply every month. You could eat straight off my garden beds, and sometimes I do. So when I heard the whispers on Tuesday morning, kids getting sick after Karen's so-called urban harvest picnic, my jaw got tight. I was walking my usual route around the block when Ms. Lorraine from 2 houses down stopped me. "Walter," she said, real low, "did you hear? The Jackson twins went home with stomach cramps. Their mama's saying it was from those smoothies at that garden thing. Something about bad kale." I didn't say much. Just nodded, tipped my hat, and kept walking. But inside, I was boiling. You see, Karen had no idea how to handle crops. She didn't water anything properly. She pulled produce way too early. And I sure as sunrise know she didn't wash a thing. The greenhouse was never meant to be used like that. It was a controlled environment. Yeah? It was a petri dish for other people's poor choices. So I did what a decent man does. I brought it up at the next HOA meeting. Oh, the room was packed. Karen sat at the head like she was queen of the lawn chairs. Folding table, clip-on name tag, the whole performance. When I raised my hand and calmly started to explain the risk of unregulated community gardening, especially when done without proper sanitation, she cut me off. Mr. Hughes, she said, smiling that icy politician smile, this space has already been approved for shared use. If you're concerned about food safety, I recommend you consult a certified health inspector. I said, you mean the same inspector that told y'all this greenhouse wasn't zoned for public access? That one. Her eye twitched. I caught it. But she leaned back and folded her arms like she was reading bedtime stories to fools. This meeting is about community collaboration, not personal grievances. Oh, okay. 1 week after she hijacked my greenhouse, I got a power bill that looked like it came from NASA. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Usually, that greenhouse runs on solar and a little supplemental electric during winter. But this bill? It said someone plugged in fans, heaters, even lights. I walked out back and saw a mess of orange extension cords snaking from the greenhouse to her back porch. I followed them like breadcrumbs. Right up to a portable generator, hers, that was rerouting juice like it was the 4th of July. So now, on top of losing my crops and my privacy, I was paying for her electricity? I took pictures. Pulled the plug. Walked right up to her porch, knocked on her door. She opened it, already frowning. You touch the generator again and I'll report you for harassment, she said. I said, lady, I've had about enough of your nonsense. You're not just trespassing, now you're stealing utilities. She had the nerve to smirk. Oh, Walter. You really should learn to share. Let me tell you, I've never understood how someone could say something so smug and sound so dumb at the same time. Now this is where things got interesting. See, it's easy to pretend you're the hero when people only see the surface. But slowly, the cracks started showing. That kale incident? Turned out more kids had gotten sick. The Smiths filed a formal complaint. That power reroute? HOA slapped me with a shared usage violation until I showed them the photos of her setup. Karen tried to deflect, of course. Claimed I had sabotaged her generator. But it was too late. Folks started whispering. Mrs. Carter stopped bringing her grandkids to the greenhouse. Reggie from across the street took his name off the community farming volunteers list. Even the HOA president, Mr. Patterson, who hadn't said 2 words to me in years, called to clarify the details of how the greenhouse was constructed. The narrative was shifting. And Karen? She felt it. When petty people lose control, they don't apologize. They double down. I started finding trash in my yard. Not random litter, I'm talking peeled oranges, half-eaten protein bars, compost bags tossed like they tripped and fell over the fence. Then she sent me a cease and desist letter. On lawyer letterhead. Claimed I was interfering with community programming. She must have used a template off the internet because the letter was addressed to Mr. Walter Green. My last name is Hughes. That was the moment I realized. Karen wasn't fighting for community. She was fighting for control. Thursday night, the storm rolled in like it had a score to settle. Winds hit hard. Thunder cracked like gunfire. Power flickered. I didn't sleep much. Next morning, I put on my boots and stepped out to check the damage. My greenhouse bent but still standing. I'd reinforced it years ago after a tornado scare. Some panels were cracked, but the structure held. Karen's fancy plastic planters? Scattered. Her generator? Fried. And her door? Wide open, swaying in the wind. I stood there in the rain, watching her run out in a bathrobe, trying to save what was left. Mud up to her shins. She slipped once. Got back up. Slipped again. And for just a second, just one, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I looked at my ruined basil beds and the broken tomatoes crushed under her eco-friendly compost bin, and I thought, you wanted a community garden. Well, welcome to the elements. See, people like Karen think they can bulldoze quiet folks. That just because we keep to ourselves, we won't fight back. They forget that grown folks don't need to yell. We organize. We build cases. We plant seeds and wait. And I had all the seeds I needed. This is the turning point. Everything you've been waiting for, the confrontation, the reckoning, it's right around the corner. Don't miss how the storm unfolds. You know that feeling when you've been holding your breath for too long? That's how I'd been living since Karen strutted onto my land with her fake HOA title and plastic sense of power. But when that storm hit and left her urban garden looking like a junkyard, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Not relief. Not revenge. Clarity. See, some folks confuse silence with weakness. But real power doesn't scream. It waits. Then it moves all at once. And baby, I was done waiting. Let me paint the picture for you. Her garden beds were nothing but soggy mulch piles. That $400 pop-up tent she bought for shade harvesting? Gone. Took off in the storm like it had somewhere better to be. And her little volunteer board? Ghost town. The last message on their app was from some college kid saying, "Sorry, I think I got food poisoning again." Even then, Karen was out there in the rain with a clipboard like she was running FEMA, trying to redirect folks to come clean up the community site. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching her direct traffic in mud up to her ankles. "Y'all be careful," I called out. "Heard them squirrels unionized. Might charge rent." She pretended not to hear me, but she heard me. That was the day I decided it was time to go public. Now, I wasn't about to sit around waiting for the HOA board to investigate, while Karen turned my greenhouse into a backdrop for her Pinterest dreams. So I sat down, pulled out my laptop, and drafted one post. Just one. On the neighborhood app. Title? My greenhouse was stolen. Here's the truth. I kept it real simple. No yelling. No accusations. Just facts. Dates. Photos. Videos from my hidden camera. Of her unlocking the gate. Leading strangers into my property. Hosting a potluck with food labeled, "Homegrown by us," when she hadn't planted a single seed. I ended the post with a question. If this happened to you, what would you do? That post got 124 comments in 4 hours. Ms. Denise from 4 blocks down replied, "This is outrageous. We need to vote her out." Reggie wrote, "Wait, you built that greenhouse? I thought it was some HOA project. Man, I'm sorry." People started sharing stories, little things. Karen snapping photos of their yards. Making complaints about wind chimes, basketball hoops, flower colors. One woman said Karen reported her for aggressive holiday decor because she had a black Santa. The neighborhood started seeing her for who she really was. No joke. 2 days later, I got a call from a local TV reporter, one of those community spotlight segments. They'd seen the neighborhood post and wanted to highlight the issues around HOA overreach and personal property rights. Now, I ain't never been on TV. I still use a flip phone, but I agreed. Not because I wanted fame, because I was tired of pretending this nonsense was normal. They came out the next day, set up a camera, asked me to walk through the greenhouse. And baby, when I told that story, how I built that greenhouse with my wife, how Karen changed the locks, threw parties and claimed it was community space, I said it plain. No yelling, just truth. Then they interviewed Karen. She tried to act calm, smiled like she was at a bake sale. "I just want to create unity," she said. This was about giving back. The camera panned over to a pile of wilted kale and some broken tomato steaks. Yeah. Real generous. People came out like it was a courtroom drama. Even Mr. Patterson, the president who usually just rubber-stamped everything, looked like he knew the spotlight was on him now. Karen walked in wearing a lavender scarf like she was heading to a poetry reading. Clipboard in hand, fake smile on her lips. I stood in the back, arms crossed. The meeting started. People weren't quiet anymore. Ms. Carter spoke first. "I was told this was a shared space. I didn't know it was stolen." Then Reggie. "Walter's been growing food for the church for years, and now he has to ask permission to open his own greenhouse." Then a younger woman stood up, someone I didn't recognize. "I work for the city zoning department. Just FYI, greenhouses on residential lots aren't considered community space unless specifically dedicated and voted on by the homeowner." What she did. "That's not legal." Karen started to speak, but they shut her down. The board voted 7-0. Her community garden project was terminated. They told her to return the greenhouse keys, to take down her signage, to issue a formal apology. Did she? Well, it was sunset, that slow golden hour where everything feels heavier. I was sitting on my porch with a glass of iced tea and my dog, Jasper, at my feet. She walked up, holding a manila envelope and wearing that tight-lipped expression of someone chewing on pride. "I brought the keys," she said. I nodded. Didn't move. And the letter of apology. Still didn't move. She shifted her weight. "I didn't mean for things to get this far." I sipped my tea. Then she said something that shocked me more than anything. "Do you have any extra vegetables? I can't get groceries this week. Let me tell you something." I stared at her so long. She started to fidget. Her fingers kept gripping that envelope like it owed her money. I thought about all she'd taken. All the lies, the mess, the arrogance. Then I looked past her, at my greenhouse, at the cherry tomatoes coming in strong, the collards ready to cut, the squash glistening under the last bit of sunlight. I stood up slow. "No, I don't have extra," I said, "but I've got enough to take care of my own." And I closed the door. This is it. The damage is done. But we're not done yet. The final part reveals what Karen never saw coming, and how Walter turned her mess into a message the whole community would remember. Don't miss it. There's something poetic about soil. People think it's just dirt. But those of us who live close to the land, who've buried seeds and loved ones in it, we know better. Soil tells the truth. It don't lie. It don't favor. And it sure don't forget. So when Karen stood on my porch that evening, her voice soft, her pride broken, asking for food, that truth sat heavy on both our shoulders. And yet, I didn't gloat. Not out loud, anyway. I gave her a polite no, shut the door. Not with spite, not with attitude, just clarity. She wasn't asking for vegetables. She was asking for mercy. But mercy, my friend, ain't something you ask for after you bulldoze someone's dignity. You'd think that once the HOA meeting ended and Karen handed over the keys like a dethroned monarch, that'd be it, right? Not quite. See, her reputation didn't just crack. Crumbled. First, folks started pulling their support for the beautification committee she'd started. Then her online reviews. Yeah, she ran a little online wellness business selling candles and bath salts. Started filling with one-star reviews and comments like, "Tried to sell me peace and stole her neighbor's garden. No thanks." Even her husband, quiet, middle-aged man who looked like he'd been tired since 2012, packed up his truck and left for a temporary stay at his sister's. Let's just say, folks noticed. I don't know how to explain the feeling of stepping into a space that used to feel sacred, then violated, then whole again. But that's exactly what it was. I opened the doors, cleared the mud off the tiles, replanted everything she destroyed. Some of the tomatoes were beyond saving, but the peppers were salvageable. My squash, hardy as ever. Basil came back stronger than before. I even repaired the drip irrigation lines myself. Took me 2 days and one very sore back. Worth every grunt. But what truly surprised me, the neighbors showed up. Not to take, but to help. Reggie brought his nephew and 2 buckets of fresh compost. Ms. Denise came with homemade cornbread and lemon balm seedlings. Even Patterson from the HOA dropped off a new motion sensor light as a peace offering. Said, "Sorry for letting things go sideways." And just like that, my greenhouse wasn't just a private sanctuary anymore. It became something else. Not community space like Karen pretended, but a shared symbol of standing your ground with grace. It arrived 2 weeks later. Plain envelope. No return address. Folded perfectly, like someone still clinging to control. It was from Karen. No apology this time, just a different tone. I've decided to step away from all HOA activities. I realize now I let my need for order become obsession. You were right to stand up for yourself. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll believe I wasn't all bad. Kay, was it heartfelt? Who knows? But I'll tell you this, I didn't throw it away, because part of growing, in the garden and in life, is knowing what to prune and what to leave. The first Saturday in September, I loaded my truck with baskets of fresh vegetables. Tomatoes, collards, green beans, squash, herbs, all packed up clean and neat. Reverend Jacobs saw me coming and waved with both hands. "You back in business, Walter?" I smiled. Something like that. The pantry volunteers were buzzing around, smiling, organizing. I handed them the baskets, each one with a little handwritten card. From the garden. With dignity. As I turned to leave, one of the new volunteers, maybe 22, college kid, asked, "So, you really had your garden taken?" I looked at him. No. It got hijacked for a bit. But it was never truly gone. Just waiting on the right hands to take it back. He nodded, like he wasn't quite sure what that meant yet. But one day he'd get it. About a month later, I was sweeping my porch when I saw her again. Karen. No lavender scarf this time. No clipboard. Just jeans, a plain shirt, and eyes that didn't dance the way they used to. She didn't walk up. Just stood on the sidewalk. "Your sunflowers are looking good," she said. "They're strong," I replied. "They bend, but don't break." She nodded. "I sold my house, moving to my sister's for a while. Thought I'd say goodbye." I nodded too. "Safe travels." There was a pause. One of those silences that feels heavier than words. "You were right about the dirt," she said. "You don't really know it until you're on your knees in it." That one caught me. I didn't say anything. She turned, walked away. People like to measure victory in noise. But I've learned real victory is quiet. It's the silence of peace returning. The hum of bees in the greenhouse. The rustle of leaves that no longer need to hide from chaos. Karen didn't leave in shame. She left in truth. And I didn't win by fighting louder. I won by planting deeper. If you've ever been steamrolled, overlooked, walked over by someone who thought their voice mattered more, hear me now. You don't need a megaphone. You don't need a title. You need your truth, your roots, and the will to stand when they expect you to bow. Because sometimes the best revenge is letting them watch you grow.